any of this.
So he doesn't know about your little overdraft with our bank? Anticipated income from new case. Well, this looks more promising. Tell us about this one. I think we'll apply the pen to all the intervening suggestions. Although it does seem a pity to lose the one that depends on winning a Sitmar cruise for a friend of your father's.
It's Mrs. Faulding, a rather wealthy widow who's turned a country house into a guest house for wealthy,
Guests?
Yes. She's got quite a collection of valuable antiques. Well, over the last couple of weeks, some of them have been disappearing. But naturally, she doesn't want to embarrass a guest with the police present, so I'm going in there undercover.
What about Ken and Pat?
Well, I couldn't get them in there as part of the investigative team, but they've got a bit of a staff shortage down there, so I've managed to get them jobs as a dishwasher and a housemaid. Pat, how can I make it any clearer? You're going in undercover. This is undercover work. I mean, you're not really going in as a dishwasher and a housemaid.
Well, why such a crummy cover, then? And you couldn't get us in as interior decorators refurbishing the East Wing?
Or guests, you know, guests in a guest house.
No, I'll drop the two of you off at the station and get a cab from there. Oh, by the way, you don't know me, of course.
Of course. Who is he?
I mean, you don't actually have to do all the cleaning yourselves. Just pretend you're doing it.
How do you pretend to wash dishes?
Excuse me, could you tell me how I can get to Lavender House?
I certainly could. It's a bit tricky, though. If you hold on a minute, I'm going out that way myself shortly. Glorious day, isn't it? You say we haven't seen the last of these floods, though. I reckon by the...
Could you just point me in the general direction? I've got a rather important job of work to do up there, and I'm not really interested in the weather. What do you want me to do with this?
You place it on the ground and spin it, in whichever direction it...
Now, don't administer more than about 2 cc's, because the effect could be fatal.
I am a doctor, you know.
Back in 1 minute.
Excuse me, could you tell me how I can get to, God, I love the country. My goodness, it's fantastic. My God, it's fairly damp. They've had a lot of rain up here. Aha! I knew it must be here somewhere. Good morning.
Is it? I hadn't noticed. I'm not very interested in the weather. I'll be accompanying you in the game session this morning to make sure you're settling in okay. But first...
Thank you, but that won't be necessary.
Oh, I think it will. I think it will. But first I'll see about a room for you.
Now, Mrs. Faulding said I could have one of the guest rooms overlooking the front garden and the river.
Ah, yes, but Mrs. Faulding was a bit delirious when she said that. I'm in charge of all household matters now that she's bedridden. Does it make much difference to you whether you have a view of the incinerator or the compost heap?
Over there we have Bertie. He's an ex-army officer, and next to him is Dr. Chisholm, a retired surgeon. They're both permanent residents.
Did you know the cook walked out this morning too?
Now, who's that over there? She looks familiar. Where have I seen her before?
On the front cover of every newspaper and magazine in the country about 5 years ago. A juicy scandal that nearly brought the government to its knees.
Of course, Zola Carey. Fancy that. Fun and games here, eh, Ken?
For those of us that have got any energy left.
What you doing here?
Oh, according to Leonard, she's writing a book about the affair. We gather she's got a 5-figure advance from the publisher.
Did you know we're replacing 4 people?
Ah, the young couple on horseback would be Tad and Jane. They're sheep farmers. Brother and sister.
Right. Sure.
And the only other people here are Mrs. Faulding's daughter and Leonard the butler.
That slime with a David Niven haircut.
He has been working here for 8 years, Bryce. If he wanted to flog stuff, he's well and truly had the opportunity.
Bryce, we've got to talk to Mrs. Faulding about our jobs.
Yes, well, Mrs. Faulding has been very ill with this flu, Ken. But I think it'd be much better if all communications with her went through the one person, me.
The games master.
I'm too old for this nonsense.
Could possibly have possessed Mrs. Faulding to hire this beast.
How he expected anybody with my constitution to be a ball boy, I can't imagine. You know, the man's an idiot.
And what are his qualifications? He knows as much about croquet as I know about potholing.
Righto, everyone in the drawing room. We've exercised our limbs. Let's give the old grey matter a nudge, eh?
Much as I'd love to, Bryce, I'm afraid I won't be able to join you for this one. A few little duties to attend to.
Genuinely sorry to hear that, Leonard.
I'm sorry, Bryce. I really must get on with my manuscript. I have a deadline, you know.
Oh, just a couple of rounds. Come on, you'll love this one. It'll be fun. It's a word game.
Mm-hmm.
How come you're doing your manuscript by hand? Wouldn't it be quicker to type it?
I never did have much need of knowing how to type.
She's sitting in my chair again.
What?
I'm sitting in his chair again. His own personal chair, you understand. Dr. Chisholm always sits here come rain, hail, or change of government. And if he doesn't get to sit here, his routine is thrown out so much that the repercussions are felt in the 4 corners of the globe. The Russian wheat harvest fails, and the All Ordinaries Index goes berserk.
I don't believe this.
Is it the same one that was here before?
Which before? The one that was here just before or the one that ate the roast?
Hello, Susan.
Who kicked Dickie?
What?
Who kicked Dickie?
Dickie?
He's limping.
Neither of us kicked the cat, Susan. I did take the liberty of placing one of them on the outside of this door.
You kicked him.
I didn't kick him. I picked him up very gently.
You kicked him. He's limping.
On which leg?
I don't want to talk about it.
Susan, the cat was up on the table.
I don't want to talk about it, all right?
Fine.
Fine.
Can you go, Bertie? Now, don't forget, if you think Zola hasn't got a real word in mind, you can challenge her. Do you want to challenge Zola, Bertie?
You should know this one, Bertie.
Do you want to challenge her, Bertie?
No. E.
E. Now, is that at the front of the word or the back of the word? Spell it out for us.
Hypocrite.
Ah, hypocrite. You've made a word.
I'm out there.
No, that's only 4 lives. You've still got 1 life to go.
Have I? It's not worth living anyway.
Susan, actually, there is something I'd like to talk about, if you don't mind. Those eider downs.
I don't want to talk about it.
What, the eider-down situation or the brutal bashing of Dickie?
There's a dog. There's a dog. Quick. Well, go on. Chase it. Go on, quick.
How many cats have you got, Susan?
Only 3.
Bertie, what are you doing in Zola's room? I said no one could hide or seek in their own or other guests' rooms. That was the ground rule. Didn't you hear me say that? Hmm? Bertie?
Come to my room for a minute, would you? 5 years ago, I had the misfortune to be in the vicinity of a certain house the night the raid was made on Zola and her party.
I'm not with you. Oh, you mean the immediate vicinity?
My name was never made public, but of course it couldn't be kept secret from everyone. It ruined my career in the army. My wife divorced me. My neighbors poisoned my geraniums. And now that dreadful creature has turned up here to haunt me. I think she's going to mention my name in her book. A certain hint she keeps dropping. It's just the sort of disgusting thing an ill-bred person like her would do.
And you were trying to get a sneak preview of the manuscript. What did you find?
Nothing. I couldn't read her vulgar handwriting.
God!
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
We always have chicken on Thursdays.
Excuse me. Everyone's got their main course and I haven't even received my soup yet.
Sorry, Mr. Games Master, but we're short-staffed at the moment and the guests have to be served first. Rules of the game, I'm afraid.
Eat your placemat, Bryce. I can assure you, you'll never know the difference. We always have chicken on Thursdays.
Come here, would you? What's your name?
Ken?
Ken. Well, Ken, what name does this go by?
Braised cabbage. My ex-wife used to make it all the time.
No doubt she was good at other things.
If I don't get some service soon, I'm going to have to leave. I've got to start preparing for the ball.
We always have chicken on Thursdays.
Oh, we always have chicken on Thursdays. For God's sake, can't you see they're short-staffed? Ken here's doing the best he can with dim recollections of his ex-wife's recipes. So why don't you just eat it and shut up? What do you want chicken for anyway? Get some red meat into you. Might turn you into a real man.
Why don't you drop dead?
No wonder he was struck off. Now, Bryce, can I see you in the library for a minute?
I'm a bit busy at the moment, Zola. Can I see you in here?
No. I'd like to speak to you alone. Someone might come in here. There's something I must tell you.
Yeah.
What do we do if someone does leave the room?
Follow them. I want everyone's movements accounted for tonight. Hurry up.
What's your cat's advance, my lady?
I'm not here. This is my mother's idea, isn't it? I'm not marrying anyone.
How about you, Samantha? Would you care for a twirl around the boards?
genial games master. Invites us all to this soiree, then disappears himself.
This kitten from last summer is living through a nightmare of lack of control.
Where's Bryce? There are people going everywhere.
Not just people. The Chinese dude out in the hall's got 'em walkabout as well.
Yeah, I know. So's the painting that was here. Look, we're going to have to tell these people about Bryce, you know. It's nearly 10:30. I know, it can't be.
Go and see for yourself.
Hope you got plenty of cigarettes. River's up again.
We can't get out.
Lavender House is on an island.
Isn't there a back way out or something?
No, we're cut off by an anna branch back there. Phones are out too, of course. Lucky we got the fun and games man on hand, eh?
Actually, we haven't. We can't find him.
That's the silly fool was trying our new hiding holes for that fun game we so thoroughly enjoyed this afternoon. Got locked in a cupboard or something. Zola, since you're already going up there, can you double-check the Games Master's own room, then come down and search the ground floor rooms? Start with the dining room, then do the storeroom, office, private sitting room, etc. Pat, you and Ken take these and search the unoccupied staff rooms downstairs. I'll make sure he's not with Mrs. Faulding, then I'll search the unoccupied guest rooms upstairs. And Tad, can you go downstairs too and do the kitchen, laundry, cellars, and so on? Make sure you do a thorough search. I don't see why we should get wet looking for him outside until we're positive he's not in here somewhere.
How's the weather up there, boys? Bloody awful down here.
Now, how long was it between the time Zola set off in search of me and the time you went looking for her to tell her that I'd been found?
About 15 minutes.
She was the only one game enough to tackle that jam tart. And I noticed she looked pretty green around the gills after she'd eaten it. Maybe she just staggered away like an old cow to die on her own underneath a bush. They're bloody hard to find when they do that.
Tad, it's no joking matter.
Well, I don't think we can achieve much more till daylight now. We've searched everywhere.
What on earth can have happened to her?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility of murder.
Don't be stupid.
Bryce?
That scream you heard.
You heard a scream?
When I was in the bath, I heard this god-awful, strangled sort of scream.
And you didn't investigate?
Well, I turned the water off and listened for a while. But it didn't come again.
Because she was...
It's quite obvious to me. The reason we can't find Zola's body is because it was thrown into the flooded river and carried away. Now, since we can't contact the police, I propose to take over the investigation myself.
You? Don't play games?
I don't intend to, Leonard. I'm beyond games. I can now reveal to you all that I am not a real games master.
Go away.
I am, in fact, a private investigator hired by Mrs. Faulding to investigate the mystery of the disappearing antiques.
Just another one of his games, is it? What proof have we got that he's a private investigator? Would a person trained in intelligence spend the first evening on the case dangling from a windowsill in a thunderstorm? He was literally too stupid to come in out of the rain, wasn't he?
I can always get Mrs. Faulding to verify it. Would any of you care to see me drag a sick woman from a bed down here, eh?
No. And in fact, Bryce, I wonder if you could see your way clear to keeping Mrs. F in the dark about Zola's disappearance, for a while at any rate. However, should it drag on for ages...
It won't drag on, Leonard. In fact, I expect to be able to present you all with the murderer this very evening.
But how? Well, there's not a single clue.
Not to the layperson, perhaps. Not to the untrained eye. During the course of the morning, I expect to interview each and every one of you, starting with the dishwasher and the maid. Now, I must insist that you all remain in the area. Thank you.
I was just trying to lend an air of authenticity to the proceedings, that's all. If I didn't say it, someone else would have.
This is supposed to be a team effort, Ken.
Exactly. So why can't we reveal our real identities too, eh?
Because by you remaining undercover, suspects are more likely to reveal something to you two than they are to me.
But Bryce, we're so busy washing covers that we haven't any time to do any undercover work. By the way, you know it's laundry day today, don't you?
I'm not doing laundry, I've got to plan my stupid menu.
With the greatest respect in the world, Ken, don't you think it'd be better if I took over the cooking? You didn't exactly win a place in the Michelin Guide last night, Pet.
But I'm doing smorgasbord tonight. Sandy always said you can't go wrong with a smorgasbord.
I think under the circumstances she'd probably be prepared to retract that statement.
Do you suppose you could shelve your domestic problems and talk about a murder? Thank you. Now then, tell me everything you saw during the period of approximately 10:30 when Zola was last seen setting off in search of me, and 10:45 when it was discovered she was no longer around to be told that I was found.
Well, as we've told you, Zola went off to double-check your room and then come back down to do the rooms on the ground floor. And then Leonard went off to check with Mrs. F and then do the unoccupied guest rooms on the first floor, and Ken and Tad and myself went off to the dungeons. Now, we'd only been there for, well, a couple of minutes when we deduced that we had the wrong set of keys.
Ah, yes. And on what was this deduction based, Pat?
Well, Bryce, it was primarily based on the fact that the keys failed to open the doors.
All right, there's no need to be facetious, Pat.
I then went upstairs to look for Leonard to get the right set from him. Presumably we had his keys and he had ours. I couldn't find him. So then I got the idea that there might be a spare set of keys behind the reception desk. On my way back, I saw Tad come out of his room and hurry downstairs. And I just saw the top of his head as it disappeared out the door. Now, I thought that was a bit odd because he was supposed to be downstairs checking the basement rooms. Then I heard a door opening, and when I looked back, I saw Bertie coming out of your room.
Out of my room? Where did he go then?
I didn't see.
I came out of my room and overheard them arranging to search for you. I heard Leonard tell Zola to check your room, but she didn't go in there. She went into her room, so I thought I'd check your room.
Now, you say you saw Zola go into her own room, but what possible reason could she have to go into her room when she'd already agreed to go to my room?
Well, it's fairly obvious, isn't it?
Well, to me it isn't.
Her fancy dress costume is on her bed. Obviously, she went to change out of it before starting the search. How do you think her costume got there?
I'll ask the questions, if you don't mind. Now, what did you do after you'd looked in my room?
Nothing. I just went back to my own room, and I stayed there Until we all met up downstairs when you were out.
And you didn't continue to look for me elsewhere?
No. Seemed to me there were enough people looking for you already. Will that be all?
For the moment, yes. Unless you'd like to tell me what you did with the manuscript.
I don't know anything about it.
Odd, isn't it? That the only thing missing from Zola's room was that infamous manuscript.
I swear, I don't know anything about it.
Well, I don't know if Jane was having a bath or not, but it's true that within a few minutes of the search, she came down, asked what was going on and joined in with it. Something doesn't add up with Tad's story, though. He says he thought it was more likely that you were either in the gardening shed or the garages. So he went upstairs to get his raincoat, then went out the front door. Something fishy about that, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
There's nothing fishy about that at all, Ken. He was the only one that made an intelligent attempt to find me. I mean, why didn't you think to search for me outside earlier on?
His raincoat. Why did he go upstairs to get his raincoat?
Oh, dear me. I fear for you, Ken, sometimes. I really do. It was raining. That's why he went into his room to get his raincoat.
No, his raincoat was downstairs near the front door. He left it there when he and Leonard came back from the river. Immediately after that, we started the search.
I came back from the gardening shed via the back of the house and saw you doing your Spider-Man act and Ken with the ladder. The rest you know. You missing your footing, you face down in the mud.
All right, let's not relive all that. Now, you've been through the whole story again and you still don't wish to alter any part of it.
No.
Tad, why did you go upstairs for your raincoat when it was hanging by the front door?
I just forgot. I forgot it was already downstairs.
You forgot. Come now, surely you can do better than that.
I was in a panic, you see. I pictured you in grave danger somewhere, perhaps in need of urgent medical attention. With all this going on in my head, I totally forgot I'd just used my raincoat.
I told you. I went to look at the river. I came back. That's all.
Can you think of anyone who might have seen you during this time to substantiate this?
You did.
I did? I saw you? Is that what you're saying? You don't seem to understand, Susan. You see, if I had seen you, well, then I wouldn't be crouching here asking if anyone had seen you, would I?
Well, I saw you.
You saw me. Where?
Where do you think? Hanging off the windowsill, of course.
Well, why didn't you tell someone where I was?
Well, if you were stupid enough to get up there...
Ah, my turn, is it? Would you care for a drink before we start?
No, thank you.
Some beeswax for your shoes, then.
As I understand it, you would have first of all checked that I wasn't with Mrs. Faulding.
That is correct. And the lady herself will no doubt verify this.
She already has. On your way to see, did you by chance see which room Zola went into?
Yes, she went into her own room.
Uh-huh. And what did you do after you left Mrs. Faulding?
Exactly what I said I was going to do. I checked all the unoccupied guest rooms.
You checked all the unoccupied guest rooms. And did you at any stage go behind the reception desk?
No. Why?
I'll ask the questions.
Fair enough. Hit me with your next one, then.
No need to, Leonard. You've already been most obliging. More obliging than you think.
Now, Dr. Chisholm says that he didn't realise there was a search on. He came down here a few minutes after 10:30 to make himself a cup of tea, and he remained here until after we all came back in with Bryce. No one saw him, and he saw no one. Now, either he's too silly to make up a decent alibi, or he's clever enough to keep it so vague that it can't possibly be checked. Have you found out anything more about Chisholm's whereabouts yet?
No need to, Pat. The murder is solved. Ken, would you ask all the guests to assemble in the drawing room in 5 minutes?
What do you mean it's solved? Who did it?
I've been thinking about that. It'd be much better if you two didn't know. That way you can react naturally. Drawing room, 5 minutes, OK?
Who does he think he is?
Can't you guess?
It's always a team effort when there's dirty work to be done, but as soon as it comes time to collect the shield... Anyway, if he's going to reveal the identity of the murderer, why can't we now reveal our identities? And let everyone get their own dinner.
I've got the feeling that by the time this meeting's over, we won't want anyone to know we're with him, Pat. Might just take a snack with us, I suppose. Can't see Bryce getting to the point before he absolutely has to. This is the biggest moment of his career.
An interesting case, this one. Made remarkable by the very short period of time the murderer had at his or her disposal to do the deed and convey the body to the river. A period of no more than 15 minutes. Now, I have established, with the use of a sack of potatoes and a timepiece...
Is that where those potatoes got to?
...that it would have taken at least 10 minutes to drag the body to the river and return to the house. Therefore, we can safely assume the murder took place within the first 5 minutes, say between 10:30 and 10:35. Now, there are several persons in this room who had the motive and the means. But there was only one person who killed Zola Carey. Bertie certainly had a motive. It is not widely known, but Zola was threatening to expose him in a book. The means? Any one of an array of service pistols he kept in his room. Oh, yes. Bertie could have quite easily have gotten rid of the troublesome Zola and secured his secret. Picture the following, if you will. Apprised of the search for me, Bertie sees Zola go into her own room before checking mine as she was bid. This gives Bertie plenty of time to select a suitable gun and wait in my room for her arrival. In due course, the unsuspecting Zola arrives, where she is shot at point-blank range, where the sound is muffled by the thunder outside and a silencer affixed to the gun. Bertie was then seen by someone else to leave my room. His destination is fairly obvious. He quickly goes to Zola's room, grabs the manuscript, hides it in his own room, returns, and starts to drag the body down the hall.
Hang on a sec. What time's this happening?
Oh, within the first few minutes of the search, say 10:34 or 5.
Well, we've got Jane coming out of the bathroom around about then.
Yes, well, obviously he checks to see if the coast is clear first. Jane is not in the hall at this point.
But a few secs later, I'm coming out of my room after I put my towel and stuff away. Whoops.
Look, he's not doing it at either of the times Jane is in the hall, all right?
What about Dr. Chisholm, then? He's coming out of his room to go down to the kitchen.
2 appearances of Jane and Dr. Chisholm. It's getting a bit tricky for him.
He'd have to be nifty, but I suppose if he whizzed her down at top revs.
OK, he's doing it earlier then, before the arrival of Jane and Dr. Chisholm, all right?
Earlier, but we've got Tad going up for his raincoat then.
And me.
Oh, were you up there too?
Pat, I asked you not to mention that.
And I'm up there somewhere, coming back from Mrs. F's room.
Yes, well, that's debatable. I mean, no one actually saw you.
Oh, no. Well, you're not here, Leonard. You're debatable, apparently.
Oh, am I? Oh, righto. If you want me, I'll be with Mrs. Faulding.
Christ, I wish someone would make up their mind. I'm getting a cramp.
It's not possible for him to be the murderer, Bryce.
So it would seem. Mainly because somebody else is the murderer. Remember, I didn't actually say Bertie was the murderer, only that he had the motive and the means. And there is still the question of the missing manuscript. No, once I ruled out Bertie as the murderer, I realized he took the manuscript after he learnt of her murder. He was observed this morning burning pages in the incinerator, and according to a witness, going about it in a very furtive manner.
Rubbish! I've heard enough of this nonsense. I told you before, I don't know anything about the manuscript.
Then would you mind telling me what it was you were burning this morning?
I didn't want to tell you this, but you've asked for it now with your insults and your false accusations. I was burning your book. 147 best-loved parlour games. That's what I was doing in your room, taking your books. If you don't believe me, you can go and look in my room. There you will find your other book on the rules of croquet. I couldn't get a good burn going with it. It started drizzling rain again.
But why? Why would you do this?
Well, you seem to have to consult your books for everything except hide and seek. I thought it might steady you up.
Well, if it wasn't Bertie, then who was the murderer?
Dr. Chisholm, too, had the perfect motive. He was driven crazy by Zola's taunts. Didn't we all hear him last night at dinner say how he would like to kill Zola?
No. All he said was, why don't you drop dead? It's just a saying.
All the same, there was no love lost between them. I put it to you that Dr. Chisholm could have come down to the dining room...
Was he apprised?
What?
Was he apprised of the search?
Don't interrupt, Ken. Come down to the dining room where Zola was searching for me. He then suggests they settle their quarrel and become friends, and she agrees. He then invites her into the kitchen, saying he has the pot on for a nice cup of tea. There in that cosy atmosphere, he slips a sleeping draught into a cup and she soon falls asleep. It is not the sleeping draught in a cup that kills her, however. What does kill her is this. A lethal overdose of an injection which I personally witnessed the good doctor purchase from a chemist on my way up here. He then drags the body out of the side door of the kitchen and heads toward the river.
Oh, really? And what does he do when he bumps into me searching out there?
Oh, hello, Tad. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. How's yourself?
Oh, about the same, Tad, about the same.
Uh-huh. What are you doing with Zola?
I've just murdered her and I'm taking it down to the river.
Oh, yes? Oh, well, carry on with the good work.
Dr. Chisholm wouldn't have the strength to drag a dead body. Well, he was too sick yesterday even to lift a croquet bat without running out of breath.
Oh, dear. I haven't got the strength for this.
Of course he wouldn't have the strength.
I realise this, but I would still like to know what it was you purchased from that chemist shop, Dr. Chisholm.
I don't think it's any of your damn business. I'm not going to tell you. But I will tell you this. It was for animal use only.
Yes, well, I never said Dr. Chisholm was the murderer. I simply said that
Why don't you get on and tell us who was the murderer instead of who might have done it? Otherwise, we may as well break for dinner.
I don't think he knows.
You don't think he's apprised of who did it?
He's a prize fool, that much I know.
Tad and Jane couldn't have done it for the simple...
Oh, God. Now he's going to tell us who didn't do it and why.
All right. I will now tell you who murdered Zola Carey. You see here before you a cruel and calculating killer.
It was the butler who did it.
It was because he was the butler that he did it. You see, Leonard was hopelessly infatuated with Zola and wanted her to run away with him. But she wasn't interested in this penniless and unambitious butler, so he started stealing Mrs. Faulding's valuables. Yesterday morning at croquet, he approached Zola and told her he'd come into a lot of money, but she still spurned him. What need had she of money? She had plenty of her own. And why should she, who had been associated with some of the most powerful men in the country, want to bother with a mere minion? Leonard was furious, and in cold blood plotted her murder. Poor Zola. She tried to say something to me just a few short hours before she was killed.
No, I'd like to talk to you alone. Someone might come in here. There's something I must tell you.
But Leonard stopped her from talking. If only I'd listened to her. That poor creature, whose life, though reprehensible, was so cruelly cut short, whose beautiful body was hurled into the dark and raging waters, to be carried away with all the logs and bloated livestock and old tin cans, to be dashed against the rocks 1,000 times, and to be eventually found after the torrent had run its course, floating grotesquely in some quiet inlet, unrecognizable as Zola Carey. as we have seen in the hypothetical case of Bertie, it would have been quite difficult to get a body out through all that traffic. The first floor hall, for example, was as busy as Piccadilly Circus on a Saturday morning. There was one person, however, who more or less knew where everyone was and wasn't. Why? Because he sent them there. Who did he instruct to search the ground floor alone? Zola. Whilst upstairs, he steals her manuscript to throw suspicion onto Bertie. No doubt he has learnt of its significance by then. From there, it's a simple matter to walk into the dining room and strangle her. He then took the body out through the French windows and dragged it to the river.
Oh, come now, Leonard couldn't do a thing like that. It's not in his nature.
Yes, it's always painful to be disillusioned by someone you thought you knew.
He was never in love with Zola. He liked her well
This is
enough.
all pure supposition, of course. What proof do you have of any of this?
You told me this morning that at no stage did you go behind the reception desk. Then how did you manage to unlock the unoccupied guest rooms that you claimed to be searching?
With my keys, of course.
Not so, Leonard. For Pat and Ken had your set and you had theirs. Pat got a spare set from behind the reception desk and you did not. On 2 separate occasions she went looking for you, but you couldn't be found. Why? Because you were downstairs murdering Zola. Do you deny that? And do you deny being the thief of this house? Last night, I found a valuable antique clock hidden in your bedroom. Do you deny stealing this?
Oh, you told me you got rid of that monstrosity.
I shut it up in another way. I wrapped it in 20 layers of clothing and...
Perhaps we should take another sweep around the eastern side.
What's the point? Leonard is dead and he and Zola are obviously 10 miles downstream by now.
Look at that, will you? The clock has stopped at 2 minutes past 7. The time Leonard was murdered, do you think?
Don't you think that we've heard enough melodramatic supposition from you for one night, Bryce? Now, I may be a fool compared with the great detective, but I think you dropping it on the floor at 2 minutes past 7 possibly had a great deal to do with it stopping at 2 minutes past 7.
Yeah, all right, all right. Now, who was where when the lights went out?
Everyone was everywhere when the lights went out. What's the point of trying to reconstruct that? The only thing we can do now is keep our eyes and our ears open before we all get murdered.
Before we all get murdered. That could be it. Susan.
What about her?
We're looking for somebody who had the motive to kill Zola and Leonard. Now, Susan doesn't like people full stop. She's probably plotting to do away with all of us, one by one.
Don't be preposterous.
Well, I'm certainly not going to turn my back on her. She gives me the creeps.
Well, I know this sounds like nonsense, but can we talk about it, please?
Look, let's not, eh?
Why not?
How can we get paid if I tell Mrs. Falling her own daughter's a murderer?
Oh, I see. You don't want Susan to be the murderer.
The same as you did want Leonard to be it because you hated him. If you'd consulted with us so he could find the real murderer, instead of doing a triple twist in the pipe position, he might still be alive. I'm warning you, Bryce. If I get murdered because you fail to consult with us again, I'll murder you.
Give us a kiss. Bruce. Don't it tickles?
She's unreal.
No, they're not in here. They've gone to their rooms. Here, and we'll put it somewhere else. Why didn't I get out before the river came up? I've got to get to them.
Now, don't blame yourself. It can't be helped. We'll probably be able to get out by tomorrow night.
And when we do, you'll administer the injection, won't you? I haven't got the nerve to...
Yes, of course. Now, quick.
hobble a horse, perhaps?
Please, Ken. We have robbery and murder on our hands already. We don't need a third crime. Besides, when it comes to Susan and animals, it's more likely to be cats than horses.
Cat burglar?
Sounds like one of Bryce's word association games.
We've just been to the river. Should be down by this afternoon.
Let's hope so. You know, I was down there myself earlier on and I saw this horse in a field on the other side. Looked a bit sick. Kept turning around, biting its own side. What could be wrong with it, do you think?
Yes, I saw it too. It's tied up.
Well, it didn't look tied up when I saw it, but it certainly looked very sick.
Which one? The white one?
Yes, the, white one.
Without consulting us. Again.
He says he's positive he knows who it is this time. I couldn't say anything because there are other people standing around.
They are not who they claim to be. They are, in fact, a pair of shabby little opportunists. For a start, they are not sheep farmers. Any farmer knows something about horses, yet when I described to them a horse that was obviously suffering from colic, all they could tell me was that the horse was tied up. They then referred to it as being white instead of grey. Furthermore, they are not brother and sister, but lovers. They came here under false pretenses to rob the place, but Zola and Leonard were onto their little game. Zola was about to tell me all about it, but Leonard, fearful of the consequences, stopped her from talking. You couldn't take the risk, so you then had Zola killed. At the next opportunity, you murdered Leonard too.
This is fascinating, isn't it? Would you mind telling us how we killed Zola?
With the greatest of pleasure, my dear lady. Tad simply went outside, around to the French windows of the dining room, walked inside and killed her. Oh! While you, as his accomplice, who was not present to receive instructions as to where you should search for me, were free to search wherever you wished. You were free to patrol the ground floor area in case someone took it into their heads to snoop around the area while the murder was being committed.
Bravo! You really should give up the investigation business and write best-selling novels, Bryce. Would anyone care to know what really happened? I can't promise it'll be as colourful. Let's see, how shall I start? Oh, I know. Apprised of the search for you...
Do you deny that your name is not Tad?
I never said it was.
But you gave me all that rubbish about your name being Terence Anthony Drummoyne Pole, which adds up to Tadpole, when in fact your real name is Bruce.
Apprised of the search for you, I went upstairs to my room for my car keys, not my raincoat, and went out to the garden shed to move Bruce, our sheepdog. When we first arrived, Susan wouldn't allow us to keep the dog here, and Jane didn't want to be parted from him, so we hid him in the shed. It's the one you chased yesterday, Ken. He'd got out. With everyone searching for you, I thought he might be discovered, so I moved him to the car for a while. Then when things quietened down, I smuggled him up to my room. The horse business, it's you whose knowledge of horses is very hazy, Bryce.
Well, when you didn't know what tie-up was, we knew you weren't a horseman. That's why I referred to it as white, for your benefit. Biting its side is a symptom of colic, amongst other things, yes. But it was stiff in the hind legs, a condition known as tie-up. Where are you going? Your knowledge is not complete unless you know this. Bruce is not the dog's real name either. His stud book name is Currawong Menelaus III.
I believe he has a partner in his investigation firm. No wonder he stayed home. Who'd want to be associated with this guy? Chinese Watson. It's back again.
Oh, there's no sign of Ted and Jane.
Where's Bryce?
Up a hollow log, I suppose.
Dr. Chisholm, you up here?
What was to stop him doing it? Then jumping up on that ledge and pretend to have been there all night?
Do you think those two are in league with him?
Of course they are. The three of them came here on the same day, didn't they?
Bryce, where are you? Answer me!
Game's up, kids.
Well, we're out of booze anyway.
I don't communicate with people.
Well, you'd better just start communicating and tell me what's going on around here.
Oh, yes, she's quite safe. She just couldn't stand Bryce's games. Right from the beginning, she wanted out. Please, Zola, couldn't you just go along with it?
Are you crazy? No, I could not. The man's a congenital twit.
Obviously, Mrs. F isn't herself at the moment, or she wouldn't have allowed the fool to get near the boundary fence.
All right, then. I won't talk to her at the moment. But I'm warning you, if he breaks out the snakes and ladders or starts rounding us up for hide-and-seek...
Oh, hell. Damn Mrs. F for hiring him. Before the ball started, I saw her trying to talk to Bryce, and I managed to stop her. She was going to tell him quite plainly what we all thought of his games. Then when she and the three of us were scuffing around at the ball, and the others had all buggered off, she suddenly turned to us and said...
What are we doing hanging around in these stupid costumes at this ridiculous masked ball when the idiot games master isn't even here?
It was food for thought. And it gave us two good ideas. Get Zola into town, where she could work in peace, and play a game on the games master. But first we had to find him to make sure he couldn't see us leaving.
It didn't take us long to locate Bryce on his little perch out the back.
I just drove her out, long before the bridge was cut.
We could see the river was going to come up.
But No, that was me you saw, dressed in Zola's costume. At that distance, with the mask and the headdress.
When we saw what a rotten fist he was making of solving the matter, it seemed like a good idea to keep the game going. We've just been hiding out in the shed. After the first murder, no one searched very thoroughly because they presumed the bodies were in the river.
Would you do me one favour? Would you water this down when you tell him?
She was going to come into half the house in antiques when she married anyway. But since Susan obviously had no plans to marry anybody, she took matters into her own hands.
So what was she going to do with the money? Go overseas, I suppose.
No, just across the river, actually. To set up a home for stray cats, her and old Chisholm. I suppose he wanted to see if he was better at doctoring cats than he was with humans. But he didn't know that she was flogging stuff to get the money. Even though they haven't got the cat home yet, they've got a few moggies in an old shack across the river, apparently. That's why she was so desperate to get out, to feed them. And give a shot to the one that was sick.
Ah, and she couldn't get the stuff out that she nicked the night of the storm. So she was left in the unenviable position of trying to return it. Oh, just when there was a great detective under the roof, too. Oh, touch and go there for a while. I bet she thought to herself, Ken, touch and go here.
All right. At least we got the check. That's the main thing.
How come you got to break the news when it was Ken who cracked the case? We never did get to meet that woman, you know, Ken.
Fair old drive home. How about a game to pass the time? I spy with my little eye.
On Talking Shop tomorrow night, Clive James, reputation squasher and world watcher, talks about his new book, The Remake, to guests at a luncheon where he dishes out sizable servings of his personal philosophy.